It's 9 o'clock, so I'll call this meeting of the regular meeting of ReGen Monterey Board of Directors to order. So Ida, roll call, please.
Chair Shirley,
Here.
Vice Chair Delgado, Director Blackwelder,
Here.
Director Askew, Director Barber,
Present.
Director Garcia Arzola, Director McKee,
Here.
Director Pedori, Director Byrne.
Here.
We have a forum.
All right, thank you. All right, could everyone please join me in stand for the pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll go ahead and open up public communications. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. No one online? No one in the room? All right, I'll go ahead and close public communications. We have a section of promotions, which I'll turn it over to our general manager.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take the opportunity to share some promotions that we achieved here at the district. We have Tom Easton. He was our evening supervisor for our maintenance team. He's got a world of effort and dedication to the organization. He is now our power systems manager that runs LFG. And he's taking on and embarking essentially another career aligned with his maintenance background. So we're really excited. Tom, if you wouldn't mind standing. You'd like to say, Tom?
Just thank you guys for the opportunity. I've been here for 8 years and I like to continue succeeding, and I'm glad to be working with a new team. Just opens up my experience, and I appreciate everything you guys have done. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 other employees that have gotten another opportunity as well. They're not here with us for this meeting. Jeff Nichols, he's now our maintenance shop supervisor, replacing Tom in that evening shift. And we're excited to have Jeff being promoted and given an opportunity. He was a Tech 3 prior to this endeavor, and we have a lot of transitions going on with LFG and maintenance. So we're really excited that we can keep our core people still being promoted up into positions that are important for the organization. The next one was a transitional move, lateral, Baldo Trujillo, 30-year employee at the MRF. I have been the MRF supervisor for maybe 2 decades now, and now has transitioned to be the landfill supervisor, which we were short for some time now, but we had the need. So we went ahead and gave Baldo the opportunity to move into that position. And we're pretty excited, mainly because he brings a lot of infrastructure, data capacity, retention of records, holding people accountable has been in his realm. So we're pretty excited to bring that balance to the ops team. So pretty excited for these promotions and acknowledging the employees that are putting the effort forward to take additional steps and play bigger roles in our organization. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's nice to see. Thank you for stepping up. All right, we'll move on to consent. We have 6A through 6D. Are there any directors who would like to pull any of these items from consent? No, seeing none. Would the public like to pull any of these items from consent? No. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board and I will be ready for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you, Director Blackwelder and Dr. Barber. It was our second. All right. Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, great. Motion passes. Okay, we don't have any recognition or presentations for today's meeting, so we'll go on to discussion and action items. We have 8A, which is to request for financial year 25-26 preliminary budget direction and authorize GM to send notification to haulers of the proposed rate increase. I'm gonna send this over to our GM for presentation. So at this point, I'd like to hear his entire presentation. We'll wait for questions until the end. Okay. All right.
All right, thank you, Chair. Before I start the presentation, I just again, want to acknowledge and thank the staff for the work for getting us to this point where we have a methodology that could be appropriate for the direction that we want to take. I also want to take the time to thank the workforce for their contributions to recognize the change and improvements that we're doing. I also want to thank the elected officials that make the time to contribute to the organizational efforts in this process. This is a big one for us. You know, this is a follow-up to our workshop. So we got a lot of data in our workshop. We had opportunities to get that information back and forth. Now's the time. We're gonna start looking at those legacy issues and future capital projects that are gonna be important for the organization to recognize when we complete them and how we enter into these next decade of approaches to stabilize the organization's revenue and really look at the options of preserving landfill life over financial gain or financial gain with reasoning and understanding the impacts to landfill life. So I'm pretty excited to present this item today. And I'll jump right into the presentation. Thank you, Chair Shirley. Thank you, board members. My name is Felipe Melcher. I'm the general manager here at ReGen Monterey, and I'd like to start with the rate increase proposal for 25-26 and some of the narrative and the reasons why it's important for us to move forward. We'll start with the budget timeline. In March, we're discussing and we're proposing fee changes to propose and develop our budget for fiscal year 25 and 26. Biggest takeaway for today is to authorize the general manager and send notification to the haulers of the projected fee increases annually. We submit our projected increase to the haulers, and so they can start doing their calculations for their own request to every municipality with other components. We would be one component of their total increase request to the city directly. The second item is receive the draft budget for 25-26 in April. And then we also will schedule the public hearing in April as well. In May, we'd like to consider and hear the public hearing for the changes to the rate fee structure. Approval of the changes will take effect July 1st of 2025. And then we'd like to adopt a resolution to approve the final budget. So here we are looking at the summary for the basis of the increase. So we have seek board guidance and proposed rate fees changes that will be developing the preliminary budget for review and coming back to the board in a draft form, and then it will come back for approval in a final form. The basis of our increase is municipal solid waste or MSW construction and demolition fee. The current existing rate is $77 a ton, and it'll go to $81 a ton. Traditionally, these two rates have been in alignment, so we're going to keep them in alignment for this purpose. An increase to single stream recycling from $40 to $41. It was a dollar increase, and it roughly represents 2.1% of an increase. We're also increasing processing fees by CPI for the following: the commercial organics, the residential organics, and the residential yard trimmings with food scraps. We have no intent in reviewing the whole rate sheet, which entails some ancillary services that we've had in last year's review of the budget and fee proposals. We went through the entire listing and we brought all those to market. At this time, we're not interested in revisiting all those and changing those again in the current year, but we'll continue to evaluate those as the market changes and have discrepancies in being at market or targeting the market rate. I want to point out on this slide here, this is the beginning basis. When we built our target model, we took two considerations, and we took an 11-year period, and we built our model on two factors for solid waste and C&D to get an increase of 5.5. And we use 5.5 for the 11 years as the strategy. Because of the rounding factors, you get 5.2. Same thing for the other lines is we use 3.5 for our theory and what our targets were going to be. And because of rounding purposes, you get these numbers that are absolute to 3.5 or 5.5. But the target is annually being in that range to achieve the target goal that we're looking for. So the rounding rules will apply throughout this presentation, going up and going down, but we did try to use the exact percentage, so if anybody pulled out their calculator, it would make sense. Here's the direct impact to the gate rates on the items that we talked about. It's a little bit easier for them to read, so you can see solid waste and construction and demolition debris going from $77 to $81. The actual increases are right next to it, which is 5.2%, representing the two streams. And then you look at the clean wood and the residential organics, currently the same rate from 47 to 49, which represents roughly 4.3%. And then the commercial organics, or the only food scrap stream, is a little bit more difficult for us to process. Thus, you can see the representation there. There's a lot more contamination. They have different acceptance rules for their category. So they're going from 67 to 69, which represents 3%. And all the fees are based on a per ton basis. Again, rounding rules were applied here. Here's some rate increase considerations that we thought were important for us to identify. So we have the fund accelerated payment, which was previously approved by the board. An accelerated payment of $19 million on CalPERS unfunded actuarial liability. So we are going to pay more into the AU for the CalPERS. So that was an item that we want to be able to continue to contribute to. The reasoning behind that was a large savings in the markup or the true up for the CalPERS percentage. You also have the 5-year labor MOU, higher cost of employment over the next 5 years. We negotiated a 5-year term with 3 of our labor units, and we have 1 upcoming in the upcoming year. We want to continue the path to fund reserves. We think it's important. The board felt it was equally important, so we're continue to fund our reserves, and we're on the path to continue to do so. We also see increasing cost of capital expenditures, and we also recognize keep pace with the cost of ongoing regulatory mandates. So those are the challenges for the operation that we see that are important for us to continue to fund. When we look at the revenues, the big item that we've been discussing as the board and staff was the future outlook to fiscal year 2036. The future outlook to fiscal year 2036 is when we potentially could decide to get out of one of our largest external agreements or our regional volumes or regional contracts. That was really important for us to recognize, is we can do one large incremental increase, we can do several small ones above normal CPI to achieve the target goal. And so when I recognize target goal, it's really to replace revenue from an existing contract that could potentially be gone, or we can choose to extend that, but it will have impacts to the landfill life and to the desires that the organization wants financial independence, or they want to rely on external contracts. I added volatile recycled material market. When I see the MRF, we've done a lot to keep our rates really low at the MRF, and that's to encourage volume to come here so we can keep our machines effective, our people and personnel efficient. But as we built the model, it was really recognized by our team that we couldn't rely on that recycling market for every year revenue to be consistent and at a margin, mainly because the market goes up and down on a monthly basis because commodity prices are driven by the demand and the supply need. So we thought these were the foundational reasons why we wanted to build our target and really understand where we're at today. So when we get looking at the projected dollar amounts for the Green Waste San Jose contract, in today's dollars, it's roughly 8.9 million. And then we made some assumptions to recognize that we wanted to do a CPI and that dollar amount would grow over the 11-year duration. We took an assumption that we normally see in our rates already is a growth factor, which is about normally 1.5% to 2%. So we use 2% to drive our target number to 18 million. So the assumption is 9 million will be worth 18 million at the 2036 point. That was the basis. So again, we used our CPI target at 3.5, and then we used for the C&D and the MSW, we added 2% to the 3.5 to get 5.5 as the total increment of increase desired for the MSW and construction and demolition commodity. So when we look at fiscal year revenues and the target model that we developed for 25 and 26, you can see again, MSW increases roughly 5.2. Roughly that equals $722,000 a year. Construction and demolition, again, 5.2, 489,000 per year. And then we get to the residential organics. Again, you can see the volume driving the number and the dollar amount. The residential organics is worth 259 in our target model. Commercial organics is worth about 27,000. And then single stream recycling, by adding the 2% or the dollar increase, would increase our values by $111,000. So that's the target view of that. Again, we use the target of 5.5 and 3.5. Rounding factors and rounding rules are being applied. Revenue target pros. We wanted to better evaluate pros and cons of doing it or not doing it. So financial independence was the biggest one from out of district contract. Even with the changes, we still have 5 other out of district contracts. So our going to 100% resiliency from day one is not going to happen. We have contracts that exceed the 2036 deadline. We have 4 of them that will go into 2050, 51, and 52. So we can't do that, but I'm suggesting that after we take a look at those contracts and really look at a methodology that we can apply 20 years out rather than 11 years out or next year out. So that's an opportunity for us. Preservation of the landfill life for future generations. And I've heard it the entirety of my career here at ReGen on my 4th year, and was really, hearing the public, hearing some of the board, hearing some of the staff is, what's the balance? Is the desire the additional revenue and keep cost rate low, or absorb the landfill life by having that additional revenue, or go to independency where we can extend landfill term? So we're pretty excited that this will allow us to make those decisions as the need exists. The third item that we had listed was a steady rate increase over 11-year period will mean less drastic long-term impact. So there, as we continue to dive into it, we can still continue to see other items that could impact that 11-term view. Plan allows for a year-to-year flexibility for each budget adoption. And I think this is extremely important. We built the model with 3.5 and 5.5. We know it's not going to be absolute. It's kind of impossible. There's other factors. As we drive up revenue, we've got to really monitor our expense and costs. They can't go up laterally at the same time. So we have other obligations on top of this request that we have to achieve. And then we'll have wins and losses. And I'll give you an example of a win. The day that we turn on the power source to Monterey One Water, we could get 5 times the amount of value that we dump into the grid, which would have an economic gain for the organization. Thus, the evaluation of 3.5 and 5.5 could be altered. You could also have a negative outcome where you lose a contract that has X amount of value, or you get noticed of it. Then you have to add that into the equation, and 3.5 and 5.5 will be altered again. So it's very important that the staff and the board stay cognizant that we built it to meet an expectation, but every year there's an obligation that's required of both sides to make sure that we're rendering the right solutions for the public, and ultimately keeping all our resources intact, even when large contracts impact our financial revenue position. Revenue built within the 11-year period can help fund infrastructure, maintenance that would otherwise cost more in the future, or new projects with a return on investment. And really, my talking points there are based on the desires that we want to have or that we're currently started in or in the act of completing. We need to get done by 2036. The more we can achieve, our house, I would say, is built, but we added some add-ons that are not complete. And so we'll be using up some of our cash flow to get those done for the right reason, so that we don't have those liabilities and risk when we achieve 2036. It'll give us a better financial position. Our infrastructure should be steadfast and strong. So this is an opportunity for us to achieve that, because there will be dollars that are gained along the way where we can put towards our liability or into our infrastructure. And finally, that we had on as one of our positive pros was the ability to negotiate payroll contracts. We want to have intent and purpose. I believe that these long-term agreements had their intent and purpose was to build a MRF, was to build a truck yard. We did that. Now we got to pay off those liabilities, and what else is in forethought of that. The opportunity to decrease the accelerated capital use and purchases. Right now, we do about 1,800 tons of solid waste. And without the contract, we would do maybe 1,000. So the speed and the pace that we wear our equipment and have to procure new equipment could be extended as well. So there's going to be opportunities along the way for us to make sure that the shoe's going to fit when we get to 2036, and it's the best fit. We're nice and healthy on the financial side and on the infrastructure side. So that's a lot of opportunity for the organization. Cons, we talked about the cons for this is we have incremental increases above the CPI. This year it's 2% over the trash and C&D, which seems very palatable for the ratepayers to achieve and for the organization to get in a better financial position. Potential higher per ton rate than neighboring landfills. And we've been monitoring, we have another slide here where we can do a comparison on it. One thing I did want to mention about the neighboring landfills is most of them don't have the infrastructure we have. So being in the same range of a gate rate with other competitors that may only be doing solid waste or composting or addressing the green waste and food waste, the recycling, usually those are independent of one another. We got it all here right now. And so the goal is not to lose any of these services along the way to 2036. Moving from the lower quartile to market rates. When I look at that, I think that's what we want to do. We want to be right around market rate. We want to be able to compete with others. Desired rate, but still keep the services that we have. So moving from the lower quartile, I think could benefit our overall strategy for the organization. When we get to single stream processing, one of the items was the proposed 3% increase was about $41.20. It represents $1. We rounded down, and we believe it's palatable. One of the things that we see in the market currently is the processing rate. When we had our baler go down, we had to go to Green Waste of Watsonville and use their facility, and they process our material at $75 a ton. That's been over a year now. So the competitive market right now for processing around $75 to $85 a ton. So we feel that achieving the $1 increase will head us in the right direction. It'll add a little bit of revenue. But moving to that marketplace is going to be important for us, but it's a delicate move. You have Republic Services of Salinas. If we get too high, they'll load up their trucks and they'll take it to their own facility in San Jose and process it maybe at an equivalent value, but it'll be an internal value for their organization. Same thing with Green Waste and the waste managements. They have opportunity to lug their material elsewhere, but the price is very competitive. And if I were in their shoes, I would bring the material here as well. So $1 increase, I don't think is going to have anybody running away from our processing services that we provide for single stream. Getting down to, so you've seen a lot of impacts right now based on the actual gate rate. This is the impact that would your residents would feel that set out collection services at the curb. When I look at the impacts for someone that had a 30 to 35 gallon can service, which is probably the medium size, or maybe the small size, would be an impact as high as 31 cents and as low as 19 cents. And when you look at the annual expense for that 32 gallon can, it's between $2.28 to $3.72 annually impact to the household resident. Obviously, if you have a bigger can, it'll be a few more cents on that, but it gives you a good perspective of what that increase would be on an annual basis, about less than a cup of coffee. When you look at commercial, and we'll use the 1 cubic yard example, you had the high of $1.91 and a low of 88 cents, and that range for a commercial customer on an annual basis would represent $10.56 as a low, and as high up to $22.92, depending where you sat on the range. So that's a little bit of the impact directly to the resident that sets out curbside collection. Here, what we did is we ran the 2024 tip fee comparison. A lot of people were changing their rates as we did. Currently, we're at 77. When we did this comparison, we were at 74, and we're expected to go from 77 to 81. When we look at the two asterisk facilities out there, the first asterisk, Solid Waste Authority, they do not include in their tip fee a transportation fee, nor the AB 939 fee, which could alter their gate rate fee if you put it all together and put a combination of those fees that were applied elsewhere. When you look at John Smith Road landfill at 6275, they're at their 15-year remaining life, so they could only take internal volume, but they are seeking a 100-acre landfill expansion. If that expansion goes through, I would highly suspect that that rate would go up because of the cost of adding an expansion module. When we look at the revenue pie here, there is, it's broken out, and it's broken out to look at what green waste of San Jose looks like, and that's what represents in the purple bar graph of 16.7%. So when we look at our regional volume, it represents roughly 41.3% of the existing volume that we have. When we lose green waste of San Jose or not, it would represent 16.7%, still leaving us with that delta of those other 5 agreements that I talked about, representing 24.6%. So that would put us roughly 75% reliant on our own finances and member agencies, with 25% of that coming from regional customers. So reducing that total number only because those other contracts go beyond 2036 and don't expire at the same time. But it's something that we'll have to look at as we continue to move forward. And we'll take some questions at this time.
Great. Questions from the directors? Silence, no questions? No? No? Okay. All right. Oh, I knew we could get one. All right. Director McKee.
On average, you say that the increase is going to be, roughly 5% or $4 per ton. Historically, what have we done the last 10 year on average?
So that's a great question. Historically, I know that when I came to the organization, I quickly realized that what we wanted to do wasn't a really great business model. One is we wanted to take care of our employees and give annual increases, yet we didn't want to have an increase that kept up with cost. And we kept on trying to move chips around to keep costs low. So historically, the organization hasn't done an increase every year, hasn't kept up with cost of living or increases that we're giving out. And so they haven't been consistent with the application of putting a dollar increase or CPI. So this is the first attempt to really stabilize what we want to continue to run the business, continue to take care of our employees, and keep up with ongoing costs. So traditionally, the organization hadn't consistently applied any rate methodology to what they were practicing here.
Now that you're planning to raise on an annual basis going forward, first year or two, probably your customer base won't care. But after a while,
Yes.
it gets expensive and they say, wait a minute. Maybe you could-
Yeah, I'm really looking at this as the opportunity or the gateway to get in. Let's do year one. And allow us to see what those outcomes are resulting in as we come around. And I agree, there's gonna be a certain tolerance, but when you look at a few cents or a few dollars on an annual basis for either your business or for your home, the gate rate, those are a lot of contractors and customers that are performing exterior work. They're passing on those costs. We want to better compete with the neighbors. We don't want to be at a rate where we're over what we can want to be. So we're going to continue to monitor that.
If you get over, the volume could shift.
Yes, yes. And again, you've seen the 100-year landfill expansion coming from San Benito. So right now they're our customer. Once they get 100-year, 100-acre landfill expansion, which is a third of what we had designed from the inception, could mean they will be our competitor in the future and could take businesses that are passing by them. So it's something that we have to be very observant on, but this is an opportunity to say, what will it result in? Annually, we got to look at the opportunities of gain. So we want to do more with the landfill gas. So thank you, board, for approving the low C system, 20% more gas.
So this is basically a 1-year increase and we'll wait and see what the second.
Yes,
third-
yes, and you can look at the 11-year projection. It's set the same way every year, but we gotta look at it every year with the intent that, are we making a marginal move in our finances the way we're projecting to? And are we cutting those expenses where we're expected to, or completing those projects that need to be done before that 2036 crunch, because we're gonna lose substantial amount of revenue, so things will change. Yes, thank you for the great questions.
Director Byrne.
Do we have agreements with each of the haulers? Are they all exactly the same? Are we able to do whatever we want in terms of rate increases, or are there some constraints with some?
No, so we have nine member agencies. 7 are with Green Waste to Hauler. They're in a unified franchise agreement, so like franchise agreements for 7. Monterey Disposal has Monterey City Disposal as their franchise hauler, and then the county, unincorporated county, has Waste Management as their hauler. So essentially, they're all flow control here. So those member agencies are obligated to bring material here, whether it's recycling, green waste, or MSW. So we can impose what we want here for those haulers. The ones that are regional contracts are on a different schedule, which are prescribed in those contract agreements with them. So I can name them off. I actually, City of Capitola goes to 2050. City of Scotts Valley goes till 2052. County of Santa Cruz goes till 2051. City of Watsonville goes till 2050. And then we have the San Benito Waste Solutions Agreement, which was a 5-year term, which will expire next year, 2026.
But for each of those, we can raise the rates to whatever we choose.
No, these ones are specific. They already have dollar amounts that were attributes, and those were all escalator contracts, the first 4 escalator contracts, getting them to 95% of the gate rate, which is what we want. That's the type of contract that we want to build, if we're gonna build them external of a gate rate.
But they'll be paying this increased rate as well.
No,
Okay, so this is just for the.
yes. Because we've been so reliant on those volumes, when they go away, it's a larger impact to the member agencies if we do nothing now. That's the intent of this discussion here today.
But the impact on the residents or the commercial operators will be what we're raising it.
Yes,
That's gonna be passed on.
yes,
But then the other company, those companies can add they're playing the same game. with
Yes,
residents, right?
yes, yes,
So that's not all that's gonna happen to the customer.
correct, correct.
So we have to just sort of wait and see what happens.
Yes. Well, and because they're so far out, we're developing a plan right now to be out of in 2036 for one of the most significant ones. I would say shortly after we start looking at these other contracts, their values, because we have 25 years from that expiration, which would mean a lot less than if we waited until the time of expiration and have a smaller window to apply the need of replacing that revenue. But for now, we'll still be about 24% reliant on external volume, and it'll be represent 24% of our revenue as well.
I know that this is a huge paradigm shift for our agency, just because we've gone so long without raising rents or raising costs. Yeah. Anyways, I really am so grateful to our general manager and all the staff. I know you've put so much work into thinking about this, and really, we're trying to understand what we know now to really predict the future. And it's hard, right? Our industry changes, there's, innovation, there's who knows what can happen. And I just want to really express my appreciation. I know that raising rates, no one really likes to do, but I think you've laid out a really good plan for why we need to do this. And, part of having a healthy landfill is really looking out for our future generations after us, whoever's going to be sitting here, in 10, 20, 30 years, our kids, our grandkids, we want to have a place for them to put their trash if we're still doing that in, 75 years. And so I know that there was a lot of thought put into this. And so it makes me feel comfortable going back to my constituents to be able to say, these are the reasons why, we want to move in this direction. So it's thoughtful. I really like planning. I like that you are looking ahead, and really, I think we all benefit from that. And it provides us with some guidance, right, as we move forward. And every year it will be different. We'll have new contracts, we'll have new revenue potentially. So this is something that can be evaluated each year, but I think it provides the framework for having that view every year. And so I'm very happy with this. So my opinion.
Might be good as we go back and present at our council meetings or even a special meeting for you to take this and make 2 or 3 slides that can tell the story. Because I think it's important for people to understand this is complicated. And we are, like you said, we're looking out to the future and we're building a business for them. It's really for them.
Yeah.
It's their trash, not ours.
Agree. And it's the landfill life, right? So that evaluation of landfill life, do we want to have a landfill life that has more than 100 years? If so, we got to get out of San Jose by 2036. If we keep on track with San Jose volume after 2036, landfill life is 75 years. We already hit tier 2 of our design, guiding principle. So it's very, very impactful. This one in particular is very impactful, what it does for longevity. The sooner you lose the landfill, the higher rates you'll begin to pay to export volume and get other materials processed. So you're on the right track with looking at it. It's really important for the long view. Currently, right now, we continue the same track, but run into some disastrous problems along the way if we don't have that forward projection. But thank you for your comments, Chair.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll open this up for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item, either online or in the chamber here? No? Okay, I'll close public comment. Are there any other further comments? I guess we are, I will accept a motion on this. Okay, I have a move approval from Director Alexis Garcia. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Director Barber. Any further comments on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, great. Thank you very much. All right, and our GM's up for this next one. This is 8B, discuss our potential revisions to the guiding principles and guiding principles for acceptance of regional waste.
All right, thank you, Chair. Just a little background on this item here. Again, we have been using guiding principles as a high level way to evaluate new business and strategies for the organization. And we also had a second set of principles called guiding principles for the acceptance of regional waste, which gave some outlines of what we were looking for when we evaluated an external contract. The guiding principles were proposed by the district ad hoc advisory task force and approved by the board of directors in October of 2004. You fast forward the reel, we're in 2025. It was the opportunity for us to look at these principles and revise them. So in your packet, you'll notice that you'll have the first set of principles, second set of principles, and then you'll run into the red line, which is really good to see how drastic or aggressive we were with rewriting the principles and finally getting to the third document, which is the guiding principles that you see on the screen. Today, we really have no action other than to hear any general feedback. I am going to walk through how we rewrote these guiding principles. Again, I'd like to thank our staff. I think David Ramirez, Zoe, Helen, Berta, everybody really participated in what history had been doing with those guiding principles. And it was really time to re-update them, especially with the new strategy or newer strategy approach of looking at an 11-year approach to an expiring contract. So what I wanted to do was just start going through the revisions that we did in the original document. So when we look at the document, we rewrote the narrative on the introduction, and then we went to governance structure. And so when we look at governance structure, it's pretty much unchanged. We didn't do much changes to the policy. We felt it was still in line to the practice that we're practicing today. When we went into the labor policy segment here, we removed the blanket 25% of operating cost. Currently, it's 20%. And when we look at the operating cost reserves, it's roughly 8.4 million today. And that already was existed. I did get asked in the workshop what it would look like to go to 25% of that reserve. And it would be about another $2 million to add to that existing amount of 8.4 million. So it would take us to about 10.4 million if we had a desire to get it to 25%. We also listed existing reserve policies and allows the board to add more policies if desired for reserves that really impact the organization on a longer view. So when we looked at the reserve policy, we added all of the policies that we enacted. So we have operating expenses reserve, it existed. But most recently, we added the capital infrastructure reserve. We added the equipment reserve. We added additional landfill closure and post-closure reserves. And then historically, we've always maintained the debt service ratios as required in the bond covenant for the bonds that were used to build the MRF and to build the hauling and truck yard where Green Waste is located at today. When we moved on into the range of waste management services, we incorporated composting as a service and trying to meet a diversion mandate that existed. We also changed the 50% diversion minimum to be in accordance with the state laws, as diversion is not calculated on a percentage basis no more. It's based on a household volume and weight. So it's a little bit different structure. So we thought we would just follow what the state mandate and guideline is rather than continue with a 50% objective. And it's probably exceeding 50% for us. I think we've been reporting 60% or so for the market. We did a minor change in the language around additional programs being added if the mandate was added. And really the objective there was to ensure that it's specified in our agreements what service they're going to get. Because you come on board for one type of service doesn't mean you get the full gamut of services. So we wanted to really call it out here because there has been some instances where the thought is to still give them other services like Pub Ed, the HHW, and we don't think that that's in accordance to the agreement, so we're gonna stay steadfast on those items there. When we get to the landfill capacity here, which, on the landfill capacity, we essentially completely rewrote the whole description or narrative around landfill capacity. And staff came up with the tiered approach regarding landfill capacity based on California regulatory guidelines, their mandates, that counties and regional agencies plan on for a minimum of about a 15-year capacity, similar to what we're seeing with San Benito. 20 years plus of capacity generally considered favorable position for an organization to know we're at the 20-year mark. So when we did that, most landfills aiming for 30 years of landfill capacity, yet we have about 120 if San Jose drops off in 2036. Staff set the tiered approach to exceed these timelines with 50 years in consideration at time to start evaluating whether a landfill expansion or a module expansion would be needed or required. Staff set a tiered approach to exceed these timelines. The tier approach would put ReGen to concentrate on member agencies only for a 75-year period, really looking at servicing the member agencies with the services that we have today, but also be looking at favorable volumes that could recognize or put some infrastructure outlay for us over a duration of an external contract. So that mainly be our focus. Is all what we're doing now should focus on operational need and not so much what we want to build in the future. As we move through the landfill capacity, we went into tier 1, 75 years of capacity, excess landfill, where we can look at external opportunities if there was a value or there's reason or there's an objective for the organization. When we go to tier 2, it's 75 to 50 years, and that landfill disposal services would be more narrowed down. We would look at our neighboring counties as opportunities or potentially narrowing down our base of customers that we could potentially have between 50 and 75 years. So looking at Monterey County, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and San Luis counties as potential customers, which puts us in a more reasonable transport areas, eliminating some of the other objectives we have to eliminate environmental impacts. As we continue to move on to tier 3, 50 years of capacity or less, landfill capacity shall be reserved exclusively for ReGen member agencies of waste. At this time and this stage, ReGen shall pursue landfill site entitlements, permitting agreements, and future landfill capacity. So it's just giving us a lot of time to consider everything we want to get done. And there's no emphasis on really going out there to support financially our operations through external agreements. We want to do that through member agencies. Finally, on the rate policy, with the goal of financial independence from out-of-district contracts, doing this ensures that ReGen can operate if outside contracts expire or are terminated early, or enable ReGen to be in a better negotiating position for its excess landfill capacity, to ensure outside contracts are entered into strategically to fund specific projects, reserves, rather than pay for everyday operations like they do today. So we took a big crack at changing the guidelines, incorporating them together. Again, there is no need to render a decision. We'd like to hear feedback. If you don't have much today, we give the entirety of the next month to send comments or suggestions on the narratives, either to the chair or to myself, the GM, and staff will come back with another draft. And we think it's going to take probably a couple of visits to the board to show the work and the movement on the methodology and the principles that could guide us into at least the next 11 years of continuing to acknowledge what the need of the organization is today. Again, I'd like to thank the staff for all the support on this. We really beat up the rate setting mechanisms, the 11-year period, and then even more so with combining the guiding principles, and everybody was pretty involved in why and how come we wanted to have certain language in the guiding principles. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. questions or comments from the directors? I have a question, Felipe. I know we've talked a lot about this, but I was curious, at what tier do we start thinking about completely building out our 400 acres of land? I know, we've talked about, well, we've got the truck yard, we've got composting, and that is, potential landfill space for our, and I know those wheels are turning. So like in your mind, at what tier do we start like seriously thinking, all right, we've got to figure that space out?
The way you develop the landfill is really on an as-needed basis. You kind of step it out. It's a big investment to do landfill liner, and you want the tonnage to pay that you're receiving to pay for the next liner. And so it's on an as-needed basis. So we wouldn't talk about the next landfill liner until we're probably gonna start needing it. We calculate it out and start designing and building it out. So it's an ongoing process, but once that base is developed, a lot of your investment capital for liners it's done because you then start moving vertically on the fill. So it's not really tied to a tier per se, it's more a fill rate question. So the more tonnage you have, the faster you're filling, the more you need to build out liner.
But I mean, when we talk about our landfill life, it's about 120 years, we say, right? And here you're in the tiers, you're giving a year, like greater than 75 years of capacity. So then do we say, okay, we know we're not going to need that space? It seems like landfill life obviously equates to, space. And
Yeah.
so I guess at some point if you've done the calculations, if we say like, okay, if we fill module 7, and I don't know how many modules we'll have before we have to start looking at some of those other places. How long is that? I guess is my question. If you can predict, are we gonna get down to 75 years of landfill life in how long does that take? I guess, is there any kind of prediction based off how long it's taken for us to fill other modules?
Yeah, the life expectancy is all about incoming landfill tonnage rate.
Right.
So the more you accept, the faster you fill. And that's the hard part about predicting life. It really all depends on how fast you're filling it. And we can play a lot, and what's happening in society. We weren't creating the same amount of waste we were 100 years ago as we are today, so it's hard to predict. I'm trying to answer your question as best I can, but it's a difficult to tie it to the tiers on like when the landfill liner base would be built out.
Yeah, right.
I
Okay. Yeah.
got a little different response, it is truly based on David's position of how much volume is coming in, so we're gonna reduce volume. I'm gonna make a very hard prediction, is that we're gonna work as staff to get us more land where we wouldn't have to relocate that truck yard or relocate the composting yard in the future, so the opportunity lives in our neighboring positions where land could be available or could be up for purchase or a discussion could be had. So we have several opportunities where we could attain additional land and abate moving the truck yard and abate moving the compost yard, keeping those resources here. And also making the infrastructure of the landfill work favorably for the organization, where all our network is here on this back end. We would need to create network on this front end, which would impose more challenges and more financial obligation. So the goal would be start looking for an opportunity where we could put more landfill space where it exists today and abate moving the truck yard and the composting yard in the future. So that would be a strategy that could be seen over a period of time without having to move those out and say, there's 25 years, but we would assume those would be the last fill areas for the organization.
Yeah.
I would assume they would fall in the last tier.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I ask is because like in tier 2, you say that you would actively start to pursue options for future landfill capacity, and I was just wondering how that related to our current.
Yeah.
Acreage.
And we can talk more, it's a complicated situation and I
Yeah.
don't know, if we're gonna be able to dialogue it out right now,
Yeah, no,
but
yeah.
we're more than welcome to talk about it future and get into the details, so I
Yeah.
completely understand your question.
Yeah, it's just, that
Yeah.
came up in the workshop, right, that this is gonna potential for the future, and I was just wondering like, how far into the future are we thinking about that? So, yeah, okay. Any other questions, Director Burns?
This is a nit, but in the rate policies, might it be better just to say ensure that at least 80% is covered instead of 80 to 100%? Or is there a reason to say 80 to 100%? I mean, would you ever have 100% covered?
Well, that's,
I mean,
you know, it's at board discretion, we put the 80 to 100% out there also for discussion. It's how much do you want the member agencies to cover the day-to-day expenses?
Just seems like what you're trying to say is we want to cover at least 80%. And that's,
It could be at the pleasure of the board. You may say we want member agencies to pay 80% of the operating costs. And then we go seek contracts to get that other 20 plus. You know, and that would be a way to keep the rates down. Or does the board desire to have member agencies pay for 100%?
I guess we could discuss that a little.
That's up for discussion.
Yeah.
Zoe,
I totally hear your comment as it relates to the semantics of the way it's written here, but I think one of the things we can look to is back to those tiers as well. You know, in tier 3, that as the way it's written as proposed here, says that the landfill capacity would be reserved exclusively for ReGen member agencies. So I think what we were trying to show is at that point, there really could be 100% self-sufficiency. And that's why the 80 to 100% was written the way it was, even
Sort of
though
like
it
a
sounds a
timing
little
thing,
strange.
Obviously, right now, we're not going to do that, but
Correct.
maybe it's a goal.
Or, you know, that's at the board's discretion, obviously, you know, how much do rates need to increase as compared to reliance on these exterior contracts, or favorable ones at least.
yeah,
If I can jump in to
Yeah.
add to that. So the board could make a decision, we pay for, member agencies pay for 100 tomorrow, you know, this during this discussion here, at which point all the other contracts are paying for other things, reserves, other projects, but the member agencies are covering the day-to-day operations, the dozers that are out there today, pushing the trash, the MRF. So that's a philosophical question for the board.
Also, just, you know, how high do we want to set that goal to push it?
Absolutely.
Push it, so we become more sustainable over time. Interesting.
any question? Any other questions or comments on this? No? I'll go ahead and I'll open it up to the public. Any comments on this item? All right, now bring it back. So again, as Felipe mentioned, I think this is going to be a little bit of a work in progress. It takes some time to digest. And again, I want to thank staff for the amount of time and effort you've put into this. Again, I love the idea that we are going to have something that can guide us moving forward. So so take your time to look through it. If you have comments, feel free to send them to myself and to Felipe. And then I think we'll probably see another draft, I'm assuming next month. And we'll continue to kind of work through this. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. All right, we're gonna move on to 8C, award the contract for the covered aerated static pile compost project equipment to Engineered Compost Systems Incorporated of Seattle, Washington, in the amount of $1,568,200. Engineering 2025-004.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we have Bailey Ramirez.
Thanks, Chair Shirley and members of the board. This is going to be somewhat of a joint presentation. Katie O'Connor, the engineer who's been working on the project, is going to start out, and then I'll bookend the presentation. So this is Katie O'Connor.
Hey, good morning, Chair Shirley, members of the board. I'm Katie O'Connor, Associate Engineer here at ReGen Monterey. And I'm giving a high level overview of composting and of the project to bring in some of our newer board members as well as the thousands of viewers that are tuning in via Zoom. So composting is the biological decomposition of organic material with water and oxygen. So the inputs of this, or by microorganisms, the inputs of this process are, of course, organic material plus water and oxygen. And the oxygen helps create an aerobic environment for the microbes so they are happy and do the job that they're supposed to do. So byproducts of this process include heat, which helps speed up the process as well as killing pathogens and any rogue seeds that are in the organic material. Another byproduct is carbon dioxide or emissions. And then over time, you're left with finished compost, which is a high quality material, dense in nutrients, which can be used when applied to soil to improve the health of the soil. So this is an aerial photo of the existing facility at ReGen Monterey, operated by Keith Day Company. The elongated piles of organic material are called windrows, and this is a windrow composting method. And in this method, the piles are turned with machines to introduce that air into the microbes to ensure that they are doing their job. The green machine is the windrow turner. This drives along the windrow, again, agitating the material, introducing that oxygen, as well as dispersing the moisture into the piles. The green truck is the water truck. So water is applied over the surface along these piles, and it drives along the pile. So an alternate method of composting is a covered aerated static pile or cask method. So the main difference between a windrow style of composting and a cask style is that instead of the pile being mechanically turned, air is introduced through a network of perforated pipes beneath the pile. So in this diagram, you can see the network of perforated pipes connected to a fan or blower, and it's pushing air into the organic material. Again, giving those microbes the oxygen they need. And by having this controlled aeration process, you're reducing odors and helping ensure that the process is happening efficiently. Also, you're saving time, you're saving labor, you're saving fuel, plus all of this equipment is electrically powered by energy generated on site at the landfill gas energy facility. The bio cover is a finished compost material that's placed over the organic pile, and this helps control emissions. In fact, it's 4 times more effective at controlling emissions when compared to windrow composting. Plus, there's systems of sensors and probes which help maintain temperature and moisture content and oxygen. So there's just a lot of visibility on how the process is working and making sure that it's done efficiently. There's also, because the piles can remain static, an irrigation system can be placed on top and water can be automatically applied, again, without using vehicles. So this is a photo of a compost facility in Oregon. You can see the black pipes there on the ground. They're perforated. The loader is applying the organic material over top the pipes. And once the pile is intact and covered, air can be pushed through the pipes, again, to aerate the pile. This is a facility in Yolo County that staff visited. And this is size similar to that ReGen would be installing. So this is a view of what it looks like with multiple piles in place. And it looks like one large mass of organic material And each pile is at a different phase in that active composting process. If you look really closely, you can see there is an irrigation system over top the pile, and there are those wired temperature probes. The equipment on the backside, there is ductwork. That is the air distribution system that feeds those under pile perforated pipes. So that's what brings us to our topic of discussion today, which is the equipment procurement. So the reason why we go out to bid on a separate equipment procurement package is because this equipment either has to be made specifically for the project, or there are longer lead times. And we want to select the equipment in advance, so that way we can drive the rest of the design, so we can progress. It's kind of like if you're doing a kitchen remodel and you need to select the appliances in advance, so that way you can size cabinets and countertops around those appliances. That's what we're doing here. So this photo on the right is the same facility in Yolo County, but looking at the equipment from the backside. So with that, I'm going to pass it over back to David. He's going to talk about the bids that were received and make a recommendation to the board of who should be selected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Can I ask a little question or?
Sure, yeah, Director Welder, go ahead.
I just want to know so we're going to be going to this method rather than what we're doing right now because of the odor issue that we have?
Well, that's one of the many benefits. So odor, it increases the throughput also because the oxygen is introduced into the pile. It makes the microbes happy and they can break down things faster.
Okay.
So the windrow, yeah, exactly. So it can get moved out, you can process more material, get it out on market.
Thank you.
Director.
Yeah, while you have the picture up there.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about the cover.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating. The cover is actually compostable material, not like plastic or tarp.
Yeah, compost is a wonder material, as Keith knows. It's very high in nutrition. It also has a great filtering capacity for odors and other kind of emissions. And so, yeah, it's just compost, finished compost.
You don't actually put another,
No,
it's just the pile itself provides its own cover.
right,
That's-
yeah. I mean, there are other synthetic covers that you can get. That's not the style that we're proposing now. Obviously, compost can be sold. So there's a cost benefit decision there. Does he want to use it as cover or get something that he can use over and over? And that's where we're starting, is using finished compost, and we'll see how operations progress. And if that's continues to be feasible.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for asking that question, Director Berman, because now it's like, now I get it. Director Barber.
So you might answer this question in your presentation, but what's the maintenance of this new system? And what's the pricing of that? And then also, it talks about the 20% contingency. What's that contingency?
Yeah, if I can
You're
get into that during the
Yeah.
presentation. On the maintenance side, it's really, actually, once it's installed, it's a very simple system. It's a blower fan, which is very low maintenance, a long time in advance before the fan goes out on you. So it's pretty low maintenance once you have the infrastructure, because then the only moving part is really the fan and replacing a couple sensors.
And the maintenance is being done on our end, not through this contracting?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. We'd be purchasing the equipment, then the equipment would become ours. O&M would be on
Okay, thank you.
Keith Day.
Just have a question on.
Yeah,
Just
sure. Go ahead, Director.
building on what Director Barber mentioned, what's the? What have you done? What are the repair costs for this type of project, should something?
Repair costs on this type of project. I mean, it can go all the way up to replacing a whole blower, which I have the cost here for an actual blower. But like I said, they're pretty durable. The main thing that does get damaged in these type of systems is the sparger pipes, which if I can go back here. You see those pipes on the ground? you can see those, they're ripe to get hit. They're ripe to, get trampled on by the wheels, get messed up. Those are HDPE pipes, and that's probably the thing that's gonna get, damaged the soonest. Those are relatively inexpensive. It's, it's probably just the cost of doing business. I'd say each one of those is, I don't know, what would you say? $1,000 maybe?
Yeah, probably
Maybe.
1,000, 1,500 probably.
Yeah, and over time, the operators will get better at not hitting them. But all the stuff behind here, you can see it's a lot of ducting. And you have a blower, which is the green piece of equipment. So like I said, the blower is the most expensive thing. Let's see. We have 3 blowers, I think, right, Katie? 3?
Yeah.
So it's about $75,000 for one of those blowers. To replace it.
Can we just talk, overall project cost and then the grant funding piece before you get into your presentation?
I mean, that's the presentation thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's my piece of the presentation
All right.
is the money.
I do have one more question. So it looks like these piles are lower in height than windrows. So is that gonna affect the square footage that's needed for this process? How is that gonna look different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with the technology, we can reduce the footprint and the residence time of the active piles, because like I said earlier, you're able to move material faster. And I think our challenge is having enough area for cured material on the site. So it's stuff that's done, being able to put that somewhere so that it can cure its designated time.
Mhm.
Thankfully, Keith has a good operation. He's got other places that it can get trucked to for curing if that, and we've kind of solved that
Yeah,
issue.
okay.
And as we've talked to the designers, we've been narrowing down the scope and the size of the cask system. We have, a facility like this will definitely fit in our existing footprint here.
Mhm.
It'll take up a very small footprint
Yeah,
comparatively.
great, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so now that you know all about composting, we'll talk about the bidding process. So when we went out to bid, we bid the project for a month time period. We noticed it in papers, sent it out to folks who do this kind of equipment design and installation or manufacturing. And we ended up getting back one bid from Engineered Compost Systems. And Engineered Compost Systems provided us a price that was different than what we were expecting. It was much lower. We were expecting engineers' estimate around $1.2 million. They came in with something around about $1 million. And so we worked with them to decide if that package that they were submitting, since they were the only bidder, if that package really met the needs of the project. And through some back and forth, right sizing the project, trying to get prepared for this board meeting, we ended up deciding that what they were providing was an equivalent solution and met the scope of what we were.
Was or was not?
It is, yes. And the procurement project includes the items that are noted here. It includes the fans, the pressure indicating transmitters, all the duct work, the temperature probes, control room, controllers, louver dampers. As Katie mentioned, there's temperature probes monitoring each pile. That information about temperature is sent back to these louvers, and they're open and closed, giving the pile just the right amount of oxygen that it needs to stay within that optimum range. And then it included the startup and training. And here's the financial breakdown. This equipment is all going to be funded by a CalRecycle grant. ReGen has a grant from CalRecycle for $3 million. And these are all qualifying expenses to be eligible for those $3 million. ReGen is also budgeted $4 million for the site development. So that's the grading, that's the utilities, that's the infrastructure design that's needed around this equipment system. So basically, the CalRecycle is paying for the appliances and ReGen's paying for the cabinetry around it. Total expenses to date on the CalRecycle grant fund, we've spent $778,000 of that. And that leaves $2 million, and this proposed expense would be $1.5 million. The ReGen funds, we still haven't built out any of the grading or infrastructure, so that amount of money is still relatively available for us to use in the coming months as we develop the full construction package. So there was a lot more information in the board packet, which we're trying to save time and do a high level, so we're happy to answer any questions about either what was in the board packet or this presentation.
David, I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
just to your last point, so what's remaining in the CalRecycle grant, we will be able to apply that to build out?
Yeah, there is still some equipment that is needed for the project, electrical transformers, electrical switchgear, which those are eligible expenses in the CalRecycle grant. We're gonna be spending those, and because of the savings that we're getting on some of the equipment, you know, hopefully that lasts through the equipment or the electrical procurement. Anything remaining, we're gonna ask CalRecycle if we can apply that to the site infrastructure, so grading and anything else we can to spend that money. They want us to spend the money, and we're gonna spend it.
Perfect. Good.
Could you take me through, or us through a little more of the explanation of how you went from something like 800,000 to 1.5 million?
Yes,
You made adjustments, obviously, to what they're providing.
we did, and we're actually, we put out a certain package in the scope, which just included, I can go back. All that silver ducting that you see there, we didn't ask for that in the procurement scope. When we initially sent it out to bid. However, ECS is kind of this it's a system, it's a kit. And so they said, well, we can also give you the ducting. And when we went through a lot of cost comparisons between the alternatives, we found that overall, this is gonna be much cheaper, probably about 500,000, was it $500,000 maybe cheaper?
So you ended up
700.
partnering with them to do multiple
Yeah,
pieces of the project
exactly,
instead of just the base.
exactly. Just ECS, this is what they do. They even gave us a quote for these sparger pipes, which are those pipes I was telling you that could get damaged. They gave us a quote for that too. But that, we think we can save a little money if we go out to bid for that. So they're a whole kit kind of
So they basically
organization.
came in and provide some education to you on the right way to do this as a package.
It's just different philosophy of how you approach it, and we're grateful that they did come and bid, and that we had the time to talk to them and ensure that it was equivalent to what we were asking for.
The funds that you're using, that ReGen is actually doing for site prep, that seems like a lot of money to me.
Yeah, projects are expensive. Yeah, I mean, that's budgeted amounts, and we do have a grading that also requires extra work, because if you work on a composting project, there needs to be basically an impervious layer put down that can be either asphalt, concrete, or compacted soil. So there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that those liquids don't get down into the ground. But yeah, projects are expensive.
Are people doing that work, or do you have to contract that out?
It would definitely be a contractor coming to do the construction work.
So there's some kind of bid process going on.
Yes, and that will come in the future. Yeah, so this is one slice of a larger project. So when we have now we have the equipment solidified with the board's approval here, if that's the choice. We have the equipment, we have the layout, we know where all the pieces go. And then everything else around it can be graded for drainage, around it, bring the electricity to the right place it needs to be. And storm drainage where it needs to be, and that design process is going on right now.
So how does this impact Day, the company that manages the compost facility now?
When we do the construction project is when Keith will be impacted the most. We are talking about a phased approach where we either do construction in half and half, where the construction is happening in one half of the project. He's operating in another, then vacates that process and kind of musical chair is what it's gonna be. And as I mentioned before, luckily Keith has another yard that he can take a lot of the curing material off site so that he can have some more operating space. But these are all the elements of the design that are currently happening right now.
How does this impact his business long term?
How does this impact your business long term?
I think it's great long term. I think it's the way of the future. It's new technology. I think just going forward in business and trying to be efficient, but also maximizing our operation and throughput. Just with any compost site, you have your conditions, you have odor, you have all the above. And I think what this, does for all of us is we're able to maximize our efficiency, because now in our current operation with, you've seen the churner, the steam it puts off, we have to be very careful when we operate. So it changes our day-to-day production, and that with this system is gonna maximize it, and you can fine tune it where you're keeping your material exactly where you want it. So it doesn't get too hot, too cold, and that helps all the emissions, but also your efficiencies really improve. So I think it's what we're doing now is a base, and then being able to cure it, finish it is just gonna be the best. I think the best move we can make, and it's in the industry. And ECS for all of the I went and did like 4 tours of different sites in the valley. They have the best name, good results, what I'd say from all of their system. Basically, this is just what they do. So, but yeah, I think it's the right move, and it's gonna be very beneficial.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, I'll take this out to the public. Any comments from the public? All right, close public comments, bring it back to the board. Any comments, or I can accept a motion? All right, Director Garcia Arzola. Second with Director Blackwelder. All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 8D, fiscal 2024 audited financial statements.
Thank you, Chair. We have a guest from LUD here to present a presentation on our audited financial statements and financial. The financial committee got an opportunity to see this in advance, so we're excited that we're here today. The outcomes of the audited financials are relatively normal. We asked for a grade, and we represent being high up there in how we produced ourselves with our audited financials. So I'm pretty excited when we get a brief narrative from the auditor himself. Thank you for being here today.
I guess the one on the left, Adam.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay,
inspiring.
thank you. I know.
All right, yeah, let's talk about accounting for a few minutes. And my name is Nathan Edelman. I'm the independent external auditor, and yeah, I think relatively normal, and normal is probably the best way to sum up everything, but I can talk for an hour. I will just try to give you a good, the executive summary of the scope and the results of the audit. And I did meet couple weeks ago, I think it was, with the audit committee, and I think some of you were present for that, so. We did go into this in a little more detail, but of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that this group has as well, but really, and actually. I can show you, advance the slide, please. Yeah, so the scope of the audit, well, I stand here, we talk about audit this, audit that, but really just to define that for a moment, you have a set of financial statements, it's a balance sheets, income statements, there are notes that are attached with them. Really, the whole point of the audit is to make sure that those financial statements are complete, make sure that they are accurate, make sure that they comply with the accounting rules. Accounting rules are set by this external agency called GASB, and our job is to really just make sure that all of the GASB pronouncements are applied correctly, which means that the financial statements are complete and accurate and useful information for decision makers to use. We look at the accounting principles. There are what's called estimates within this financial statements. Estimates are things that don't have an exact correct answer. If you think of cash, there is an exact amount in the bank that the auditor can verify as of this June 30, 2024 cutoff date. Talking about pension or OPEB, you have a landfill liability. It's an estimate because you've hired an actuary that figures out, well, it could be here, numbers can be here. Auditor has to look at the estimates, make sure that they're reasonable and that they comply with the accounting standards. So we go about all of this, we ask a lot of questions, we look at a lot of documents. If as a result of the audit, we identify what's called internal control deficiencies, those are also required to be reported as audit findings. And typically, control deficiency would be us coming in and saying, yes, the financial statements are correct, but some kind of adjustments, differences had to be posted that were discovered by the auditor. It's not a bad thing, but they are required to be reported. Next slide, please. I stand here. We ask the questions. Our job is to report back. So part of the audit has just a couple of pages with the firm's firm letterhead and has some opinions in it. In all material respects, we'll say what we think is the results of the audit. That's pretty much it. But the district, Garth and the folks on the finance side, they have to put together the debits and credits, reconcile accounts. They need to support the audit and give us the information that we need to do our job. And so really the district is responsible for the financial statements. It is the district's financial statements, not the auditors. And so with that, next slide, please. This is the last slide, but with that, the results of the audit, which two takeaways, two things. One, opinion on the financial statements is what we call an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. That's the most exciting opinion. That really means that the financial statements are accurate, that they're complete. That's the opinion that you want. And then the other thing, I said, if there are what's called internal control deficiencies, those are required to be reported. And there were adjustments necessary for pension and for OPEB. And that is the definition of a control deficiency, which means that the numbers are correct. We have all the information, we were able to figure out what should be the correct debits and credits to get to the end result. But the fact that the auditor had to come in and say, adjust these numbers, that's a control deficiency, and that's something that is required to be reported. We've spoken with it, and I cannot say what 2025 will look like, but I think there is a plan so that those deficiencies are not there for 2025. I'd say just a little context. They don't involve daily operations, doesn't involve cash or the things that happen on a daily basis. These are translating actuarial valuations for pension from CalPERS for the OPEB program, translating those into debits and credits and posting those into the GAAP basis financial statements, and probably nothing that's odd or nothing unusual. Very, very similar for similar entities to the waste management district. So with that, I'll turn over to the directors, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those as best I can.
In the last slide.
Yeah.
Under number 2, internal controls, is it unusual? What percent of your audits you have a problem where you have to go and correct that data?
So I don't know the percentage, but I
Rough
don't,
number.
I would not say it's unusual. But I would say the majority of similar size entities, similar to the waste management district, they need help, they need assistance with just coming up with these entries at the end of the year. And oftentimes that is because of internal control.
We've been doing this for 30 years. And the last 29 years has been okay, but this year is not so good.
Yeah, I'd say the standards, the things that have to, the debits and credits, the accounting entries, they do change every year. The accounting standards also change. And it is true, once you have a process in place, typically you can rinse and repeat, but that is not always the case. And in this case, there were adjustments that were necessary.
Does your firm recommend to the company that they need to change their procedures and do better estimating, better, because we're out of whack this year versus prior years?
Yeah, yes. And it's not an issue with the estimates, it's really an issue with taking the actuarial evaluations. In this case, it's really CalPERS controls most of this.
Yeah.
And it's figuring out the debits and credits and.
I've sat on this side of the table
Yeah,
at various places for the last 40 years. This is highly unusual. I don't ever remember in large corporations going through this situation where it has to be corrected. And so I find that somewhat unusual. We're quite a bit unusual.
oh, yeah, I think if you sit on it, some of these smaller, mid-sized governments. Resources are constrained and it is difficult to come up with a calculation.
You're saying it's all right then to have these kind of mistakes?
It's not okay. I don't want to be looked at as minimizing it. The fact that there are control deficiencies, those do need to be addressed.
Okay, I've just never seen this before.
Yeah,
I've been doing this for 50, 60 years.
yeah, and I hope that, I think there is a plan, so they're not there next year.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? I mean, I know in the finance committee, Director McKee, we did make sure like, okay, now you know what to do going forward. You know, do you know what you're doing, show what you're gonna do differently, and I think staff understands and will make those adjustments.
And now, have you been auditing us for a number of years?
Yes,
How many?
so last year I was not here. Last year would have been number
Your firm.
6. And so I want to say 7 years. Don't quote me, but about 7 years.
Is this the first time we've had this issue?
This is the first time with this specific issue. There's been control deficiencies in the past, not the exact same issue.
Any additional questions? All right, we'll open it up for public comments. Any public comments on this item? There's some public comments. Okay, we'll bring it back to the directors. Any further comments, or I'll accept a motion?
So moved.
All right, okay. Moved by Director Barber, seconded by Director Garcia Arzola. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? All right, Nathan, thank you very much for your presentation. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. All right, so the next item on our agenda is
Can I make a comment?
yes.
I think this is rather severe and it was discussed, finance committee, so forth, and we're gonna work a little harder next year. I'm just surprised that we've had this issue and it's, because normally it's plain Jane and it's just, okay. So
Okay.
I pass it on.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the next item is 8B. We're gonna skip that because that's connected to our closed session item. And in interest of time, just because we have some directors who I know have a hard stop, We're gonna skip staff reports, although I do, Garth, we love your report, guys, well, thank you. If you have questions, we can contact Garth. With the TAC, Zoe, was there anything that you feel like you need to tell us, in terms of your report? I don't wanna completely gloss over you, but,
Maybe two quick things.
okay, two quick things. would be
Yeah, I'll number them out as they appear on the agenda. The first thing is item number 2, we're working on a draft budget, which is ReGen Monterey's agreement with the member agencies. That'll come forward for SB 1383 compliance in majority to this board at a future meeting, but we're working on those budgets and your staff has been involved with that. And item number 4 is a creation of a new subcommittee as a part of our group. And that's to start evaluating the 2030 expiration of the green waste hauling contract franchise agreement with 7 of the 9 member agencies. And coincidentally, the city of Monterey has an expiration at that same term. So 7 of the 9 member agencies will need to select or extend agreements come 2030. So there is a process that we're starting to undergo with your staff. And there'll be some engagement both with you as elected officials and serving on our board and in your county in the coming months and years.
Okay, great. So keep that in mind. All right, thank you, Zoe. We have no other correspondence. We'll move on to general manager communications.
I'll try to make it as quick as possible. ReGen Monterey's communication staff attended Monterey Farm Day at Monterey Fairgrounds on March 6th. Thousands of third graders from across Monterey County visited the fairgrounds to learn about livestock, ag technology, food safety. ReGen Monterey uses the opportunity to connect with teachers and students about our school educational programs, to teach about curbside organics collection and how kids in the community could help reduce compost for local farms. Second item was very exciting for us. ReGen Monterey is an award finalist in 2 categories for top government communication honors in the state of California. ReGen will compete with the Excellence in Public Information and Communications EPIC Awards from the California Association of Public Information Officials. We're also nominated for the Best Public Service Announcement for our battery fire video and for the Photography of the Year social media. I want to thank Zoe and team, Eric directly. You know, he's our photographer, he's our storyteller, social media avenue for the organization. All government agencies in California are eligible, making this a very competitive award. We'll learn if we're going to take the top prize or not. We're excited and we anticipate an award coming from both of these items here. So very excited to announce that. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Zoe and team. And all the people that are in the photos and helping tell us.
All the models.
Last item I have is we will be sending out the CSDA schedule. It's out and we'll send it out if there's any interest from any board members for any participation in any of the courses that they offer for being part of CSDA. And that will complete general manager comments.
Okay, great. All right, we're on to board communications. Olivia, we didn't talk about the finance committee appointments. Is that?
At this point, I would like for the chair to invoke adding Vice Chair Bruce Delgado to the Finance Committee so he can participate. We expected Director Barber to sit in 2 sessions and then he would take over, but
Right.
he had participated and has become available. So Director Barber, thank you for filling in. Will not be required on the next one if
So it won't be
it
required.
won't be required if you make the motion or not a motion, just
Yeah.
add him to the committee, the finance committee.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We need to add.
That's for April.
Yeah,
Okay.
for April. Yes. Okay. All right, so that's it. I think we will be going into closed session. I see Rob online. Well, let me just say we're going into the closed session talking about our legal counsel. Is there any public comment on this closed session item? No? Okay. Rob, would you like to read us into the closed session, please?
I just wanted to indicate that as stated on the agenda, the board will be going into closed session with regard to the personnel matter identified relating to the possible retaining and finalizing an arrangement with a new legal counsel for the district and for the authority.
Thank you, Rob. And if there's anyone else online?
Just for clarification on the finance committee, Dr. Hartman will still be on the committee for April, or?
That's what I was trying to get at clarification. I think not is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, so I think Bruce will be able
Okay.
to attend.
All right, so then.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the
Yeah,
clarification.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barber.
Yeah, thank you.
The board went into closed session to discuss the agenda item relative to a personnel matter and the retaining of new legal counsel. The board reached a decision and has decided in closed session to retain the firm, hire the firm of Shute Mahaley. They will then proceed now to contact the firm and negotiate a contract, which will be brought back to the board for finalization. But that's the action of the board. No other action was taken.